If it does not do it, then we're going to go. I think something's wrong with, oh, there it goes. All right, there we go. Hello, hello. Let me add my friend in. Ooh, all right. We have some technical issues. Hello. All right.
We overcame.
Back. We are good. Hello, everybody out there. This is Inel with Pals Consultants. I have my podcast, Parenting at 10. We are back. We have not been doing this for about a year, so I'm excited to be back into this and bringing my first guest back on, Miss Patricia Gasier. Y'all welcome. Woo! I'm super excited to have you. So we're just going to dive right into it, okay?
Yes.
I just want to kind of introduce you just a little bit, and then you can kind of elaborate even more, if that's all right.
Sure.
So you are a mom of 3 amazing boys. They're 18, 16, and 12, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
And you have adopted this model, trauma-informed parenting model, which you've utilized in your own personal life for yourself.
Yes.
And so I'm intrigued by this because, that's what I do. Anytime I know someone and we talk about things, I want to give more tools and parenting things out there for other parents. So I'm excited to have you. You also work with children and families for over 12 years. So you have a background and a passion for this. So I'm excited to have you on. So I'm just going to get you to start. So tell us a little bit more about you and give us a little more bit about your background in the trauma-informed model.
Absolutely. So I have always worked around, I think, populations that have experienced trauma. I just didn't realize how much I gravitated towards it. I've worked in childcare. I've worked and I volunteered for a board of directors. I've always worked with women and families in some type of capacity, form or fashion. When I was younger and right out of college, I worked in a it was a traumatic brain injury institute that was right outside of Houston, Texas. And I was their general manager and I oversaw the rehabilitation program. So I just dealt with work things. And I got to see a multi-treatment discipline team working with people. And that just fascinated me. Everybody kind of coming together, wrapping themselves around this client for their better good. And that model in and of itself really intrigued me because everybody from their disciplines were kind of coming in, applying their knowledge. And so then fast forward, now that I'm working in foster care, I kind of see that same model because you're pulling in a lot of different professionals from different fields. And I got to work in this area first off as a recruiter, and then I had to take all the training classes to turn around and train the parents. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of how I got interested in trauma-informed parenting.
That is awesome. Well, I'm excited. So everybody's probably talking like, okay, she's talking about this. What is trauma what is being a trauma-informed parent? What does that mean? What does that look like? Explain that to us.
So I started teaching the classes. I had to learn all of the curriculum and I taught the same thing, or I'm still teaching the same exact curriculum. And it's been over a year. And over time, with me saying the same things over and over again, it started to actually sink into my brain. And this is how I know that it made an impact in my family. I was in the car. I picked up my 16-year-old son from work, and I think I snapped at him. I don't remember exactly the situation, but I'm pretty sure I delivered it very harshly and I snapped. And then I also said, I think maybe I'm doing this wrong. I think maybe I've been parenting you wrong. And he looked at me and he said, it took you this long to figure this out. Oh. All those things that you teach over and over and over again. And so he had been listening to me. I'm in my home office teaching the same class twice a week for over a year, the same series of classes. There's like about 9 of them. Mm-hmm. My children heard them. They heard me. And so it made a difference and impact in their life because they're like, hey, why aren't you utilizing these things you're teaching? Because they make sense. They sound good. And so that just changed me. I realized, wow, this isn't just for children who come from very difficult, hard places. This really can be applied across the board to all children. And so I started making those changes within my own family. It radically changed my parenting. It radically changed it.
Now, I don't want to interrupt you, but you said something that was so important to me, listening to our children. You know what I mean? I think as parents, we have this mindset, and I don't know how you grew up, but the way I grew up was my way or the highway. And so we have that, we kind of keep that going. It's like, well, because I said so, because this is the way I'm going to parent. This is the way I told you. But when you listen to your kids, if you stop and listen to them, amazing how you're just it just warps your whole. And I know, even personally, having three boys and having a child that has his disability, he's taught me and changed my parenting drastically.
Yeah.
You grow and you're just like, it just amazes me because our kid listen, and they do deal with that repetition over and over of us yelling, of us doing these things. So shifting, I wanted to ask you, how was the shift for them when you did this modeling of the trauma informed modeling? How did that shift for them?
Amazingly and radically and quickly.
Mm-hmm.
One of the first things that I did, and this takes practice, this was not something that was innate to me. This wasn't something that came easily to me. I had to practice it. I had to accept that if I was truthful with myself, there are things in my parenting that I just absorbed from my own parents, and I didn't think it through very clearly. It just seemed, hey, it worked for them. I turned out okay. So I just absorbed it. And then when I would apply it within my own family, a lot of times I was applying it through a filter of my own shortcomings, right? And that's not something I took into account, that would affect me that much. But if I was honest with myself, there are a lot of things I could have let go of. I didn't have to have the adopt the same techniques and skills my parents did, and there's no judgment on them at all.
Yeah.
It didn't serve me. It didn't serve my children.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the quickest things that changed was when I adopted the compromise technique. So the compromise technique is a child, maybe they make a statement or they're offered a choice. The example that we came up with was my son had asked, I think he had asked to go spend the night at a friend's house. So instead of me just flat out saying no, I said, well, I'm just not really, we can't really do that. The timing, blah, 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 blah.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, well, can I have a compromise? Okay, what's your compromise? Well, can he pick me up and we hang out for a little bit and he drop me back off at like 11 o'clock, but I won't spend the night. And so I accepted that compromise. And what that did is, when a child I'm not presenting the compromise, right? I'm not controlling the decision that he comes up with. The child is creating the compromise. They have to think it through and utilize those skills to come up with their own compromise. And the parent can then accept or adjust a little bit as needed. But then that's a back and forth exchange as opposed to a shut down.
Right.
It's just a hard no.
You know what that kind of reminds me of? That conscious discipline too, like a good mixture of both. And I like when you say that compromising, because I think that, like you said, I think it's this control thing that we always have. But if we can just stop and work together, and it's almost like you're still narrating it, you still have that control as a parent, but you're also giving them that mindset to think for themselves, think for their own, and make those choices.
And those are life skills,
right, that they need to learn.
Yes.
And so I want to ask you, kind of shifting a little bit. So there are different types of challenges and behaviors that any type of parent deals with. What kind of things can they look for, or what kind of, I guess, what can they see in their child that is traumatic? That, because when you adopt this model, is it worse or not worse? Maybe it gets harder to deal with, parents who've had those children who've come through these really drastic background, like working in foster care. You have a lot of children who come through and go through so much. What kind of behaviors and things can parents see, and how can trauma-informed parenting help them?
There's some typical behavior that has been identified specifically for children who have come from very hard places, and I think that's really across the board. But some of those behaviors identified are anger, defiance, withdrawal, sexually reactive behavior, hoarding food, depression, approaching strangers indiscriminately. Those are some of those trauma-related behaviors. There's always a driving motivator behind it. Going to our teens for a second, a lot of teen behavior can be extreme, but is very typical teenage behavior. How you know that it is not is the severity with which it lasts and the amount of challenges it presents in their day-to-day life. So if you have a teenager that is withdrawn and depressed, we know teenagers go through that. But if we can't get them out of bed, they won't go to school. They will not shower. They are withdrawn and shut down. They have no interest in anything. And this is lasting longer than 10 days. That is a problem. There is something that needs to be addressed there.
Right. And so I'm so glad you said that, because it kind of leads me to my next question. So now these parents know what being a trauma informed parent is, and using those models. What kind of strategies or tools can you give them, or is there books, or is there website? What can they use to kind of start implementing these things?
They're so good. Oh my goodness. So there's Dr. Dan Siegel,
Mhm.
Dr. Karen Purvis, The Connected Child. If you look on YouTube, you can find lots of YouTube videos. They do have books. There's podcasts. DCS even offers podcasts. There's so much information out there. I'd recommend not to drink from a fire hose from this,
Mhm.
but kind of look at your child's behavior and what your specific concerns are, and kind of start from there and start going backwards. There are techniques that you can use as a parent, such as, time in, redos, logical consequence, natural consequences, compromises, redirection,
Mhm.
ignoring behavior. I'm just spitting this stuff out, I know, but I'm saying that to give parents hope. There's techniques out there. And
Right.
anytime you can make something even a little bit better for yourself and your home and your family, that is a victory that you have got to hold on to that. And that's going to get you to the next, and then the next. It took me a solid year of saying the same things over and over again before it sunk into my mind. Yeah, I mean, it boggles my mind a little
Mhm.
bit. It took me that long, but it did. It took me that long, and
Okay.
I don't regret it.
But you said something I think a while back about, which I really love, that when these parents start to shift their mindset, that's a big thing. And I always talk about that in a lot of my parenting, is shifting our mindset, but also knowing that it's going to take time. This is
Yes,
not a miracle thing. My husband always says parents always look to me when they want questions. They want me to just pop up a can and say it and wave my magic wand and say, all right, it's done. But like you said, it took a solid year for it even just to click. That's not even starting to utilize the model. It's
yeah,
clicking in your brain to
yeah.
realize I got to change something.
Mhm. It took
So I
me a
think
solid
that's
2.
important that parents know that this is going to take time, and you're not a failure because of that. You
That's
know,
true, and I would also say to not overlook the small victories. If
right?
you know yourself as a parent, you know
Mhm.
what get to know what triggers you. A lot of times, things that trigger parents are they take it very personally. They see themselves as a failure. If their child starts, doing a lot of mouth business and back talk, that anger starts rising, that blood
Mhm.
pressure starts going, because really and truly, we are taking it very personally.
Right.
And if we have, if we have anything else that's going on, then that just compounds it. So knowing yourself well, I would say, is any parent's first step in this approach, is knowing yourself and finding out your own self-care techniques first.
Mm.
What can you do in the moment, and what are you going to do long term to care for yourself? And that's not just, a nail appointment set for every 10
Right.
days. That is serious self-care and time. I remember as a young mother locking myself in my closet, into my bathroom,
Mhm.
because that was the only place I had
That
where I
quiet space, right? Right.
so finding those things, because if you know what triggers you, you'll be able to stay a little calmer next time,
Yes.
not emotionally react or take it personally. Most of the time, it really has nothing to do with you. That child and what they're experiencing, they have their own internal ecosystem, right? And
Right.
we just kind of gravitate in that field. And then all sorts of 4th of July fireworks go off when they react and we react back and forth. So, yeah, knowing yourself first.
I like that, and knowing that there's a function to that behavior. That you're right. It's we should not take it personal. You are so right about that. And one thing you mentioned is, and I'm always a big advocate for, is that we're teaching our kids too. They're learning that social emotional learning, how we interact with them. So if
Yeah,
we're yelling at them, going off, that's what they're gonna turn around and do. You know what I mean, to the next person.
you're
So
so
it's
right.
almost like that, producing that bad fruit. You're trying to shift that.
Yes, one thing that I can tell you, because I like to share my failures with people, because I don't want anyone to ever think that they can't do something. So I tell you what I did wrong. So let me tell you what I did wrong before I
Mhm.
knew about any of this.
Right.
When with my middle son was always the loudest, the most extreme, the most, he is my kid that is fearless in
Mhm.
every capacity. And what I did wrong when he was growing up, I regret this a lot. He's 16 now, but when he was younger, I would always put him in timeout, and it was timeout away from me. It was like in his room
Mhm.
for 15 minutes, just, and what that was for me to be able to calm down and boot myself. But I didn't apply a technique truly. It wasn't a technique. It was just,
Go away.
yeah. So what I heard from Dr. Karen Purvis, and she's so right because she teaches the time in method, is if you continually send your child away from you to process their own feelings and emotions and behaviors when they're teenagers, guess what they're going to do?
Ooh, I like that. Right. And then you're wondering why they're not around you. Well, why are you on spend time with me? Why? Well, this is kind of what you probably instilled in me already. Right.
Yes.
Oh, I love that.
Figure it out yourself. Right?
Oh,
That's
wow.
what you're doing when they're 4
Mm-hmm.
and 5 and 8 and 10 and 12, when they're 15 and 16,
Right.
14, 15. That's exactly what they're going to do. They're going to figure it out themselves. And that's going to be on social media with their friends who also are clueless to life because they're kids. And they're going to reach out to anybody who seems that wants to pour into them. And that's, we're preparing for adolescence when they're really little. So when you have foster children that come into your home, if you already have this awareness and a set of skills that you're starting to develop, you don't have the benefit of that look back. And truthfully, you don't have to have it. You can start from the moment that they're there, because you have a set of skills and techniques and you're already not taking things personally. And you can really make a huge impact in that child's life.
Look, I could talk about this all night. I love any type of information to help with parenting, because you're right. It's not just dealing with families who are foster parents or blended families. It's across the board as parents. I mean, even grandparents who have to be parents. It's just, parenting is just this broad thing now. It's not just mom and dad. It's just so much more, because so many people have to step up and be mom and dad, aunts, uncles. So I just think I'm excited about it. Like, I could talk about this all day. I love the information you're giving us. So I do want to ask you, where can people kind of find you and reach out to you to kind of, if they have more questions, or where can I direct them if they, because I mean, you got a lot of knowledge and I'm sure they have plenty of more questions.
Okay, let me just tell you, I love foster parents. That's why I do what I do. I love them. Every job I've ever had, I find a population that I just adore and connect with. And it is usually women and children and families. It just has been. But I love answering questions. Even if I can't help them directly, I will find somebody who can. I'm passionate about that. I am not somebody who's going to be like, man, that's hard. Good luck. Right. I want to be able to help them at least find some resource in their area. So the Facebook for Stepstone is Stepstone of, I'm so sorry, I got tongue tied. Stepstone Family and Youth Services of Tennessee. And you can direct message me there because I'll get it immediately. That's probably the easiest way to get me, because if you go through the website, it has to filter, but it will come to me. That's stepstoneyouth.com. And you can always type in there, what you're looking for, what kind of resources, and you just let me know you heard about us on Inell's podcast. So I know that you're looking for resources and help. And I'm happy to help in any way that I can.
And I will put all that stuff after we're done this. I'll put it as a link down there for anybody who's looking for it. I'm so excited. And just thank you for coming on, for sharing, just your wealth of knowledge, especially trauma-informed parenting. Like, I'm excited to take some of these tools and utilize them myself. So I'm excited. I really am. And I'm excited to be able to give other people pointers because of this. But it's just so much more to it. And that's why I'm glad and hoping that they will reach out to you, because it's just so much more and it's amazing. So I appreciate you. I thank everybody for tuning in. Thank you for coming on. See, we weren't even on that long because we're parents. We got too much stuff to do.
We got to do stuff. Like, we just scratched the surface of this. Scratch.
Yes. And if you guys want to know more, she's definitely, and actually I bother her all the time. I'm like, I love talking with Patricia. She's probably sick of me.
No, I do not get sick of anybody, especially people who just have questions and stuff. Yeah.
And you're really good about that, and I appreciate that. So thank you, everybody who's tuned in. Please share this broadcast. It'll also be on YouTube. Share it. If you have any questions, please reach out to me. I can direct you to Patricia. And we will be coming back August 1st with a parenting and faith panel. So I'm excited about that. So you guys tune in for that. That's going to be coming up, I believe, next week. It's coming up soon. So I'm excited. Thank you all for tuning in. I appreciate you. I love you all. Patricia, do you want to leave us with something like a saying and something inspiration for these parents out here?
One of my favorite sayings, I think it's Rita F. Pearson, and this is just a snippet of her quote, but she says, every child deserves a champion, an adult who will never give up on them. So even if you're discouraged, if you can identify with the never giving up part, you're doing something right.
Oh, that just got me. I got all emotional. That was amazing. I love that. And I'm going to use that. I love that. Well, thank you again for taking the time out, your busy schedule to be here. I appreciate you. I love you all. Please, if you did not catch the beginning, you got to go back and watch it because she gave us some jewels, some nuggets. Y'all got to catch it. All right. I love you all. God bless you. And I will see y'all next week. Thank you again, Patricia.